Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Abracadabra. AKA Citizen Abra, he began his magical days as a Flash villain, first appearing in comics in The Flash issue 128. He's from the future, of course, like most of these guys are, but it's a future where, sadly, magic shows aren't a thing anymore. Yeah, sorry David Blaine, gotta get a new job. He's from the 64th century and technology has become so advanced that pulling a rabbit out of a hat just simply won't cut it anymore. I heard about the time machine powered by M-metal, he just had to get his glittery magician hands on it. It was only capable of one trip, so Abra snuck into the laboratory and shot back in time to the 20th century where magicians were still celebrities, like Chris Angel or David Blaine or David Copperfield or, you know, the other ones. He would use technology from his timeline well beyond what we're capable of and then blow our minds in these magic shows. The shows were going well at first until people got bored, then they were actually more interested in this new statue being built in town, so he figured the next logical way of getting attention was to start stealing things, starting with this fancy new statue. He kept stealing, and he kept stealing after that, and he kept using his future tech to evade capture, so when it comes to magicians, Abracadabra is very committed to the craft, in the future or the past. Number 9, Gore the God Butcher. The God Butcher will be played by Christian Bale in the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder sequel, and yes, he is a time-traveling menace as well. He made his first appearance in Thor God of Thunder issue 2. He was born on a planet with no name, which is always a great sign. Gore lost his parents when he was very young, and he was told to pray to these gods, because they would always make things better, these glorious gods. And then after getting a wife and son, death kept looming over, and he lost both of them as well. Really tragic stuff. So now he's a little bit more than upset at these gods. He wants them to answer or to pay, one of the two. With the all-black Necrosword powers, he heads out for revenge on these gods, but in the past. He would use the Pool of Forever to travel back in time and make these attacks happen. He would use the Pool of Forever to go back in time and then attack all these gods when they were babies, right? So it took different versions of Thor from different timelines just to put a stop to Gore the God Butcher. So with this new Thor movie coming out, including Natalie Portman, Mjolnir, Lady Sif, I feel like it's gonna be a cosmic headache and do some time stuff in there as well. But in Taika, we trust. It's kind of like when Rhodey suggested getting rid of Thanos when he was younger by, you know, Gore the God Butcher is basically that mentality, but 10 times worse. And with powers. Number 8, Timothy Drake. The Red Robin, aka Tim Drake, first entered comics in Batman 436. He was a young boy who saw the Flying Graysons show live in person. He even received kind words from Dick Grayson, and Dick dedicated that act to Tim that night. How lovely. Now, of course, this was moments before Dick's parents, John and Mary, tragically died during this act. A night Tim would never forget, especially when he witnessed the Cape Crusader himself, Batman, consoling Dick Grayson afterwards. So years later, when Tim was 9, it was Batman and Robin taking down the Penguin, and Robin did this quadruple somersault, the only flip that could be performed by a Grayson, and then he connected the dots. He's like, oh, so you're him and you're him. Got it. Tim followed them around for a while, and then after Jason's death, Tim suited up himself as the third Robin. But in the Titans Tomorrow storyline, we see the Teen Titans travel to the 31st century to assist the Legion of Superheroes, and when they return, they accidentally end up 10 years in their future. So they meet older, darker future versions of themselves, including Timothy Drake, now going by Savior. This version of Tim is ruthless. He even carries around with him Joe Chill's gun to help get the job done. So when the team gets back to their real timeline, they swear to never become their dark counterparts and they split up. But, like I said earlier, this split up is actually what ends up causing the dark versions of themselves to happen in the first place. Time! You can't mess with time. That's it. The Titans Tomorrow storyline is definitely one you need to check out. We love dark, evil versions of our heroes. We can't get enough of them.
Number 7, Doctor Doom. Weirdly enough, in a way, Doctor Doom is also a villain from the future, as he does like to travel back to the past to enact some villainous plots. He traveled back in time to study with Morgan Le Fay, and he's also gone back in time as well with Iron Man to the period of Arthurian legend. One of his most iconic plots, in my mind as well, was when he wanted to use the Fantastic Four to help him steal Blackbeard's treasure by traveling back in time and recovering it. Which seems like a really easy way to possibly mess up the timeline for a reward that somehow, I don't know, it doesn't really seem worth all that trouble. I know it's a chest of treasure, Doom, historical pirate treasure no less, but is it really worth possibly changing the future for? And messing with time? I don't know. Number 6, Monarch. Monarch is another villain from the future who actually, it turns out, was originally a hero. I love these reveals, especially when you are the hero finding out that you become the villain. Gasp. Monarch is actually Hank Hall, who ends up becoming a villain in a dystopian future after his partner Dove dies. For those who don't know, Hank Hall is the hero Hawk of the superhero duo Hawk and Dove. Hank wouldn't be the only hero to become known as the future villain Monarch. In fact, it seems likely much of the villainy behind Monarch comes from the suit that Hank and later Captain Atom wear while donning that mantle. In fact, in the case of Captain Atom, it seems the suit is very much to blame here. Suit making people evil and crazy. Number 5. Nimrod. Nimrod has become even more intense in the last few years, managing to make the overall silly sounding name of Nimrod strike fear into the hearts of mutants and X-Men fans everywhere. Nimrod, despite actually often being associated with the idea of someone being inept here in North America, is actually a word in a literary sense that can mean a skillful hunter, which actually makes it, I think, a very fitting name for Nimrod. But yeah, I didn't know that even until I was writing this, and then I was like, oh. Does sound silly though, you Nimrod. Skillful hunter is definitely what Nimrod themselves has become associated with in terms of all the crazy stuff they've done. The Nimrod of Days of Future Past, Earth 811, is a type of sentinel that originally traveled back in time to fulfill its mission of destroying the X-Men. In a past future viewed in Powers of X, we also learned that Nimrod has the potential to be the end of mutant kind and humankind as we know it. Humans basically become tools to be used by Nimrod to destroy mutants, and mutants are all but extinct in this future. Number 4. Extant. The thing about time traveling characters is that you can have a few different versions of them, whether that be in one single timeline or across multiple timelines. In the case of Extant though, we are fortunately keeping things pretty linear thus far on this list. Extant is actually the name that Hank Hall took up after his Monarch persona, and if you thought Monarch was bad, Hank Hall's Extant is arguably worse. Extant is Monarch, but now not only advanced, but with the ability to time travel. He teams up with Hal Jordan's Parallax, and the two villains plan to take control of time itself so that they might manipulate it as they so desire, altering reality itself.
Number 3. Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal is to travel back in time to stop this unknown factor amongst the X-Men. Okay, so he comes from this dark future and he goes back in time to change it because something bad happens. There's some bad mutant, okay? But this happens where most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch, and then this one child, Hope Summers, was born, the first mutant born since M-Day. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back in time in the first place. This kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-Second War. So Bishop thinks the only way to save his future is to travel back in time and take out Hope Summers as a child, but he fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating this new future where Cable is remembered as the hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was actually remembered as the villain. So he was the villain in his own story, and he didn't even know it. And finally, number 1, Kang. Kang the Conqueror. As Loki gets closer to wrapping up, we're starting to see some higher powers at play here. The Time Lords were just androids, Loki was banished to a realm full of other Lokis. We're not really sure who's calling the shots yet, but signs are pointing to Kang. Jonathan Majors is already set to play the time-traveling villain in the next Ant-Man film, so let's do a quick refresh on him. Kang the Conqueror, aka Nathaniel Richards, made his first appearance in Avengers issue 8 back in 1964. Kang has seen many centuries. He can travel through time, and his futuristic suit of armor is built with weapons that can take on any superhero from any timeline that he chooses. He's super powerful, and it sure helps when he travels with armies. That often does a trick. So he discovered time travel tech from the 31st century developed by Dr. Doom, and being a descendant of Reed Richards with that brain power, he figured out a way to make it work to his advantage. He traveled back in time initially to become Pharaoh Rama-Tut, but once he returned to his 31st century, it was now just a wasteland. So he figured, okay, now I'm gonna go all the way back and just rule Earth to prevent said destruction from happening. I feel like Kang is one episode away. We're so close. I can feel it in my soul.
Number 10, Chamber. Chamber is a weird character, but also a beloved character. Like many weirdos that I love to talk about, Chamber is also a mutant. His name is Jonathan Starsmore, and while he may actually have the potential to be considered Omega level, that doesn't make his powers any less weird. His powers relate to the fact that he is actually made out of pure psionic energy, or at least he was once his mutant powers manifested. manifested. When his powers first manifested, as a result, they blew a massive hole in his chest and his face, basically blowing off his jaw. While many people would be immensely harmed or even killed by such an occurrence, Chamber was not. Jono, as a result, no longer needed to breathe, eat, or drink, and his blood even did not need to course through his veins to keep him alive. As such, he is typically seen with a scarf or some other piece of clothing covering the lower half of his face, because, you know, it's not there anymore, and he communicates telepathically, as his jaw was blown off when his powers first emerged, so, you know, kinda hard to talk without a jaw.
Number 9. Flatman. Flatman, or Matt to his friends, is a mutant with the power of being flat and being able to stretch his limbs. He got his start working as a Mr. Fantastic impersonator at parties before eventually deciding to go into the hero business himself, joining the Great Lakes Avengers, assuming the false identity of Dr. Val Ventura. In addition to his stretching powers, Flatman can also make himself nearly invisible by turning to the side. Now, Mr. Fantastic's powers barely make any sense and are weird, but Flatman takes this to a whole new level. Unlike Mr. Fantastic, he must remain two-dimensional when using his powers, which brings up a lot of questions about the placement of his internal organs. But he is well versed in a made-up fighting style he calls origami fu. So, make of that what you will.
Number 8. Beak. Beak is interesting in the sense that he has a physical mutation as a mutant, but one that is seemingly kinda useless. His mutation granted him wings and a beak, a bird-like appearance overall, but really these things are only an appearance alone. Beak does eventually manage to fly in the comics, but only after a long time trying to figure it out. And even then, he struggles really hard to do so, and can only fly for short distances at best. So he's no angel, if you know what I mean. Beak's real strength lies in his ability to be so likable. He makes friends easily and is usually more useful in that regard. What's even stranger though is you would think this might be challenging for someone like Beak, who, you know, looks pretty abnormal. However, this seems to have the opposite effect from what you'd expect, and instead of alienating people, Beak finds it all too easy to draw people near, relate to them, and make fast friends. But hey, he's a pretty nice guy, so I suppose when you really think about it, kinda does make sense.
The Avengers Age of Ultron storyline is a lot better than the MCU's version of that. The comic Age of Ultron has better time travel stuff than the movie Endgame does, honestly. I mean, Wolverine goes back in time, he tries to kill Hank Pym so that Ultron's never created, but while he's there, he has to talk to other Avengers who are also back in time on a different mission. It's wild, it's a great time. It starts off with New York City in ruins. Spider-Man is zipping around the city, all these heroes are missing or they're dead, and the only way for the city to survive this apocalypse is by offering superheroes to Ultron, who just rules everything. So She-Hulk and Luke Cage are amongst these survivors, and they have the plans basically to just go in willingly, and then once they're inside, they're gonna break everything apart because they're super strong. But then when they get there, it's not even Ultron that's running the show, it's actually Vision. The Vision is being used as a conduit from future Ultron, so he's safe, you can't just go and punch him and then everything's fine. He's in the future, he's safe, he knows what's gonna happen. We're kind of screwed. We can't punch our way out of this. We have Ultron already on top. Ultron is actually barely in the story, funny enough, but the stakes start off raised, so you feel anxious the entire time reading it. It's a great time travel story. Definitely check it out. Number 6, Reverse Flash. Eobard Thawne made his debut in Flash issue 139, titled The Black Flash. He was the OG Reverse Flash. He was born in 2451 when his parents genetically engineered him, because that's the thing you do in the future, and you can engineer your kids to look and be funny and cute, I guess. Okay, cool. But he lacked the social skills in this time to make his parents truly proud, so they decided, you know what, another son may be the key. A new best friend, great idea, you know, they can pair up and talk and be friends and stuff. Okay, cool. I grew up with siblings, I get it. That second son's name was Robert. He spent so much time trying to keep an eye on Robert and to make his parents proud and to like babysit him, that down the road his application to study the Speed Force at the Flash Museum was rejected. He was too busy, couldn't even study. So he studied it illegally. But he was caught by his brother, who is now an officer in the Science Police. This guy is interesting and a little confusing. So a future version of Eobard traveled through time and prevented his brother from being born, and then he was able to study and was in turn this time around admitted to the Flash Museum. Great. But then when Professor Drake was on the verge of proving the existence of the Speed Force, Eobard has trained his whole life for this, so he wanted to collab, but Drake said no. He wanted to do it solo. So he traveled back in time again and eliminated Professor Drake from the equation. So next time around, there's no Drake, there's no problem. Now Eobard is the professor at the Flash Museum and was nicknamed Professor Zoom. Reverse Flash is responsible for the death of Barry Allen's mother and his wife Iris West. He just rips timelines and the Flash's life to pieces. That's his whole thing. Number 5, Maestro. In Avengers Endgame, we cut to 5 years in the future. Hulk is now smart, he's taking selfies, he's dabbing, he's hanging out with the team, but he's embarrassed by his past smashy version of himself in 2012's Avengers. We love growth, we love seeing a character change, but what if the Hulk had lived even longer on this planet? Well, that's where we get into the Incredible Hulk Future Imperfect storyline. As the title suggests, the future is not so bright here. There are no flying cars, there's actually nothing really there. It's not a paradise at all. When we see the future Earth 9200, we're seeing a Hulk 100 years in the future as well. We find him after a nuclear war put the planet close to extinction. So the Hulk, or rather the Maestro, was older, stronger, and scarier looking, all because he'd been absorbing all this nuclear radiation from the Earth. He became even more unstoppable and, of course, just super jaded, just super evil. He had to face a future version of Rick Jones at one point, and then he ended up losing a battle to said Smart Hulk as well. I wouldn't want to face any version of the Hulk at any time. I don't want to fight Smart Hulk, War Hulk, Horseman Hulk, or even Bruce Banner. I don't want to fight the scientist Bruce Banner.
Number 3, 3D Man. When the Skrulls abducted test pilot Chuck Chandler, the human proved more wily to deal with than they anticipated. He tried to escape on his rocket plane, but accidentally caused an explosion that destroyed both the Skrull ship and Chuck. Bizarrely, Chuck's brother Hal witnessed the explosion, which caused Chuck to become a two-dimensional being living in Hal's glasses, imprinting an image of Chuck in each lens. If you think that doesn't make much sense, just you wait. When Hal wears the glasses and concentrates really hard, he can merge the two images of his brother, causing Chuck to emerge as the 3D Man. When freed from the glasses, 3D Man has 3 times his normal physical abilities because, you know, 3D. As an extra bonus, Hal falls into a coma every time 3D Man comes out of his glasses, only waking back up when his brother returns to the glasses. This is a confusing and convoluted gimmick that doesn't really seem worth it if all it does is free a hero who's not particularly useful. Also, the name 3D Man must be confusing for characters who don't know every detail about his life. I mean, most things are in 3D, right?
Number 2, Arm Fall Off Boy. Arm Fall Off Boy has to be one of the weirdest ones out there. Unlike another odd hero, Bouncing Boy, who eventually in the Prime Earth continuity achieved his dream, Arm Fall Off Boy has never made the cut for the Legion of Superheroes. And that's saying something, considering that the Legion of Superheroes themselves are kind of a weird superhero team by all definitions. Arm Fall Off Boy has the power to detach his limbs, which he typically then attempts to use to beat his enemies with. I mean, it's pretty cool that he can remove his limbs and survive, but it's less cool that really all he does from there is use his arm or his leg as a weapon. Especially as this means he now has less limbs to like move himself with in combat, so that's really pretty silly. And so is the onomatopoeia that is often used to describe the sound of his power. Plorp. What a great onomatopoeia.
Number 1. Fluff. First appearing in excellent number 3, Fluff probably takes the cake for having the most confusing, disgusting, and odd power I've seen in a long time. Fluff is able to generate bucket loads of belly button lint at will and vary its chemical composition. Now first off, ew. Secondly, belly button lint is just stray clothing fibers that come off of your clothes and collect in your belly button. Trust me, I know. Fluff wears a costume with a very deep V, which allows his navel to feel those sweet summer breezes, which means that he wouldn't have any belly button lint, which begs the question, what exactly is he shooting out of his little tum-tum? You're free to speculate in the comments, but I refuse to give this character one more second of thought.
Number 10, Savior. Savior is a future version of Tim Drake who becomes Batman. Doesn't sound so villainous, right? Well, this future Bat version of Timothy Drake takes things a little too far, which is what makes him more villainous than heroic, despite taking up his own version of the cape and the cowl. Drake in the Titans Tomorrow reality is known by the vigilante codename of Savior, and has gone to extremes to do what he believes is right, meaning that Drake doesn't hold back and kills villains or even heroes who get in his way, eliminating them permanently. Drake and the world were seemingly transformed by a crisis event. In addition, Batman was also killed by Batwoman, which heavily shaped the life of Tim Drake in this reality, who would then do what he swore he would never do and continue on the Batman legacy in Bruce's place. Number 9, King Thanos. King Thanos is an alternate version of Thanos who hails from a pretty terrible future where he has successfully successfully destroyed almost all life in the universe in an attempt to win the favor of Lady Death. In this universe, Frank Castle also becomes Ghost Rider after being killed and then making a deal to become Ghost Rider, returning to Earth in an attempt to avenge the fallen heroes of Earth, only to return too late, with Earth pretty much being decimated by Thanos already. As Ghost Rider, Castle lost his mind from loneliness, but would later have no other choice left but to become the Herald of King Thanos. King Thanos actually has a few people left to kill and needs help, so he actually sends Cosmic Ghost Rider, aka Frank Castle, back in time for a younger version of himself to basically help him in his final battle. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more time travel future-based lists, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Chronos. Chronos is a somewhat confusing character in DC continuity because there are multiple versions of him, and this confusion isn't entirely the fault of alternate futures or time travel either. It's actually more to do with the trajectory of the DC main continuity. Chronos, not to be confused with Chronos, no H, back in the New Earth continuity was known to be a clock-obsessed villain of Ray Palmer's Captain Atom. However, his clock obsession would soon develop into an obsession to perfect the means of time travel, and this obsession would translate to his Prime Earth continuity counterpart, who was an agent of Argus specializing in, you guessed it, time travel. There is also another version of Chronos, which is an entirely different person, Walker Gabriel, who found Clinton's tech and then more used it to become an anti-hero instead of like a full-blown villain.
Number 7. Forget-Me-Not. Not to be confused with the other Marvel character with the same superhero name who controls pheromones to make men fall in love with her, Poison Ivy style. Zabby has what could allegedly be called the power to be immediately forgotten by anyone he meets as soon as he leaves their field of vision. He was a member of the X-Men, although none of his teammates were aware of this most of the time. In fact, Professor X had to set up a psychic reminder to remind him once every hour that Forget-Me-Not existed. He had his uses and was especially good at reconnaissance missions, but once Xavier died, he became depressed and left the team. They didn't notice, despite the fact that he gave the eulogy. In the years since, he has taken up work on the mutant island nation of Krakoa as a detective, partnered with the Juggernaut. They make a good team considering that Juggernaut never remembers that he has a partner.
Number 6. Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist is known for his weird power, which when it first manifested, actually scarred the face of a young woman he happened to be making out with at the time. His power is that he has acidic vomit, which I'm not really sure how you could best utilize that, and it would definitely make for quite the hazard if you had the flu and you're feeling really nauseous. He wears a protective mouthpiece to help prevent any other dangerous cases from happening. Zeitgeist's acid vomit is powerful enough that it can actually burn through solid steel, but other than that, he is just somewhat more durable than your normal mortal human, which I guess makes sense. If you are someone who can vomit acid, you have to be fairly durable to even be able to do that and live. Axel Clooney is a mutant and used to be the leader of the X-Force at one point, but currently leads the rival team to Ecstatics known as the Excellent, which also, if you aren't reading the Excellent, you should check it out.
Number 5. Gold balls. Can you guess what gold balls is able to shoot out of his body? If you guessed gold balls, congratulations! Fabio Medina discovered this really odd mutant power while falling victim to a robbery in San Diego. Armed with his gold balls and his signature catchphrase, "Gold balls," Fabio took the world by storm as the newest member of the X-Men. Now, his powers don't make sense when you think about them too hard. Where are these balls coming from? How are they being formed so quickly? You know, the kind of weird stuff that applies to a lot of superheroes. But what sends Fabio into the realm of the bizarre is the fact that it was eventually discovered that the gold balls were actually infertile eggs that he was producing and shooting at people. In light of this news, Fabio retired the name Gold Balls and started calling himself Egg.
Number 4. Stone Boy. I think it says it all when you belong to a team with the words substitute heroes in the title. Dag Wentham is known as Stone Boy, and he belongs to the team known as the Legion of Substitute Heroes. He is an alien from the planet Zwen who can transform into a stone form, becoming super strong and super durable, but also immediately it makes him unable to move, rendering him completely immobile. Yeah, so not super useful in combat if you want to like actually do anything or beat someone, but pretty useful I guess if you just want to survive? Let me put it another way. Stone Boy also has not been spotted since the New Earth continuity existed. I think that tells you just how ridiculous his abilities are. So ridiculous that we can't even seem to find a place for him in the massive universe that is the Prime Earth continuity. And this is even after he finally manages to gain some ability in a possible future to move somewhat while in his stone form, post 0 hour that is.
Number 4. Time Trapper. First appearing in Adventure Comics 317, Time Trapper was introduced to readers as a warlord in the far future who prevents the Legion of Superheroes from traveling into their future with this iron curtain of time. The Time Trapper's main goal basically was to steal this weapon that could absorb every energy in the universe, just this Dyson vacuum full of energy called the Concentrator. Now the team caught wind of this Time Trapper when they could no longer jump more than 30 days in the future. They're like, okay, something's up, there's some higher powers preventing us from being badass. He resides comfortably at the end of time, accompanied by his servants, the Glorith of Baldur. Time Trapper can age anybody he wants, either a couple years or straight to the ashes and bones part. In Action Comics 385, Time Trapper created a temporal force barrier in order to seal a time-traveling Superman away from the 20th century. He's that powerful.
Number 3, Immortus. Immortus is one of the most powerful enemies of the Avengers, who was actually revealed to simply be an alternate path that the villain Kang the Conqueror could have chosen. Because there is so much time travel in Kang's past, there are a lot of alternate reality versions and versions from future and past timelines floating around that sometimes even come into conflict with each other, in addition to also fighting heroes along the way. Immortus is one such alternate Kang self. Lord Immortus is what Kang would become while choosing to ally himself with the Timekeepers. He is virtually immortal, using advanced technology to dramatically slow the appearance of aging, and often spends his time traveling through it, fixing various issues with the timelines and maintaining them, which of course grants him a lot of power. Eventually, Immortus would be killed, but even after his supposed death, his corpse still played a key role in a few different plots. So even when Immortus was dead, he was still doing stuff, apparently. Number 2, Professor Zoom. Professor Zoom is Eobard Thawne, the main villain of Barry Allen's The Flash, who traveled back in time just to mess with the Flash's life. That's how much he hates him. He has also been known as Reverse Flash before in the comics. Eobard Thawne hails from the future of the 25th century in DC Comics. Being a very fast speedster powered by the negative speed force, there is much that Eobard can do and accomplish as a villain. Aside from traveling back in time and to other dimensions, he can use his super speed to not only be super fast, but also be super powerful in battle, as his speed also inherently gives him super strength. He also possesses the ability to heal and the ability to manipulate molecules, allowing him to phase through things. Despite being a villain in the New Earth continuity, Thawne even used his molecular manipulation powers at one point to save the DC universe, which I think makes you pretty powerful in my mind.